All right. Hello and welcome to the Deep 7 Press channel. This is a channel that's going to focus on the role-playing games published by Deep 7 Press, co-founded and many of them authored by Todd Downing, who is my guest today. My name is Dan.
Hello.
Hello. My name is Dan. I'm going to be the game master for the first set of real play games we're going to put on this channel through the Airship Daedalus game. But before we dive into that, Deep 7 Press is a smaller publication. The games aren't quite as well known as the big boys, so we want to take a minute and get to know the system and get to know the creator behind the system. So that's what we're going to do today, kind of a episode 0 of our episode zeros before we get into the real play. So, Todd Downing.
Awesome. Hello.
Hello, how are you doing tonight?
Doing all right. All right. How are you?
I'm also all right. Our new cat and our resident cat are in the same room, which is mostly going okay, but there's also some
good drama,
some cues and missed cues.
Some cat drama.
Boundaries, new cat, boundaries. But let's talk about you. I've known you for a few years now.
All right.
I've known you for quite a few years now, and in the time I've known you, I've known you to write songs, play songs. I've known you to write screenplays and direct and produce screenplays. I've known you to direct theater. I've known you to act in theater. And I've known you to write narrative fiction. You have a whole ton of creative outlets that you pursue.
Right.
So what is it about role-playing games? Why do you write role-playing games when you have all these other creative avenues? What draws you to them?
I could phrase it with a question. Why choose a particular meal over another one? During the week, if you have all of these other wonderful, delicious foods at your disposal, why choose one over the other? It's a preference. I love the interactive aspect of it. I love creating things for an interactive audience, and basically building an open sandbox for people to come and play in. Yeah. It's a different experience than writing narrative fiction, because that you have ultimate control over. Yeah. And so occasionally it's actually really kind of nice to just, again, build a sandbox and then give control of it over to the players and the people who want to come build interesting things in your sandbox.
Okay. All right. But then why not just write stories, modules for other role-playing games out there? Why were you drawn to create your own system?
Well, I started by writing modules for other games, but when it came time to kind of look at producing some more inclusive and robust settings, my collaborators and we looked at what was out there, and nothing was really quite doing everything that we wanted a system to do. Okay. And so we started throwing around ideas and mechanics and things, and testing them out, and ended up with what became the XPG system.
Mm-hmm. XPG is what we call the system used for all the Deep 7 Press games. Aeroflight, Airship Daedalus, Rads, Santa Soldiers, all those kind of things.
Red Dwarf.
Red Dwarf was XPG?
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
An early version of it, or pretty much...
no, the whole thing.
The current.
Since Aeroflight has gone to a second edition, with every edition, we tend to streamline and edit rules and change things that need to be changed and introduce new things that make that make everything work a little bit better, more
Okay.
streamlined. Um, we've really gone from focusing on the original version of XPG, really focused on the 2d6 mechanic, which gives you a very kind of strict odds pyramid. It's like an arrowhead instead of a curve, which a lot of people prefer a curve. And so we decided to start using, instead of the 2d6, the d12, which gives you, basically a straight line in terms of odds, but with the same design ethic that the higher your stat and skill combination, the better your odds are at doing a task.
Yeah.
So it's always been a roll under, a self-target system.
Yeah. And I think that'll be more clear as we later in our talk we'll get crunchy with the rules there for a bit, and I think that'll be more clear. But Red Dwarf was using one of the earlier versions of the XPG system.
With the 2d6.
With the 2d6,
that was what we focused on. And you can still use 2d6. I mean, we still talk about that and the difference between using 2d6 as a randomizer as opposed to d12 as a randomizer.
Sure. Yeah. And for those wondering, unfortunately, the Red Dwarf role-playing game is out of print.
It is out of print and out of license.
And out of license. That's why it's out of print.
Yes.
So check eBay, but it's a ton of fun. So what were some of the things, if you're looking at the systems, and we're not going to get into criticizing other games or other systems out there, but what were some of the things that you were wanting to pull in into the XPG that you weren't getting in a single game? Like, can you give an example of two things that you pulled into XPG that were from competing systems? Or
well, there were. I like to say that XPG's baby daddy was probably the interlock system from Cyberpunk 2020, and the baby mama was West End Games D6 Star Wars.
Okay.
It's those are probably my two favorite role-playing systems from the classic late 80s, early 90s era of RPGs. Yeah. I've found elegant mechanics in a lot of different games, and the ones that tended to appeal to me as a player tended to be very kind of common sense, having a series of attributes, but just basic attributes, and then skills that fall under those attributes. So a stacking stat skill system. And we tried some with kind of having an arbitrary benchmark and a high, roll high kind of mechanic. And that seemed to be just like everything else out there. And to differentiate our own, and I've always liked the idea of a self-target system, which comes from early days of playing percentile systems, because that's what, inherently percentiles are self-target.
Right.
So it's a way for the player to pretty much always know what they need to roll, or to actually keep track of that, as opposed to the GM always having to be on top of that and always having to be the one that's
setting a difficulty level.
Exactly.
Meet this or don't meet that.
Right.
Yeah. What would you say the strengths? Sorry, the new cat has jumped into my dirty laundry basket.
Is that a euphemism?
No. If it were, I'd be describing when he jumped into the garbage can earlier tonight. What are some of the strengths and weaknesses of the XPG system, in your opinion?
Well, again, strengths is that it's pretty intuitive. Once you get the basics down, it's, everything is kind of there because it makes sense. One of the I love the way we do damage. That damage is not a random roll; it's a factor of how well you hit. Right. That's one of my favorite things ever.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's so
so
frustrating. You
the
roll a critical hit, and then you roll a separate damage, and it's bollocks. And you're
well,
just like,
and
ah!
if you roll a critical hit, you might be doubling that random damage, but it's still random.
Right.
Whereas, in XPG, if you hit really really well, you will do a multiple of the normal damage for that weapon.
Yeah.
And that's what I think it does really really well. It tends to make combat very kind of gritty, and I like that it's very realistic. Like the difference between sitting there and trading blows with an equal partner, you could do that all day.
Right.
But if somebody gets a lucky hit, you could be out. You could be dead in one hit.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of there was a game for the PlayStation, a fighting game for the PlayStation called Bushido Blade that was very much like that. You can take one single hit and gone.
Yeah.
What I think the weakness is, because of that, it takes a little bit more calculation at the moment in terms of factoring damage and that kind of thing.
Right.
Because you're not rolling as often.
Right.
You don't have the drama of, okay, now another dice roll to see how much damage we're doing.
Yeah.
So
if you get hung up on the math, you can break the mood a little bit, but
exactly, it's a trade-off. It is.
Although once you really start flowing with the system, I find I get hung up on the math less and less. So the familiarity helps us run through it a bit more smoothly.
Definitely does that. And the other thing I will say about the system is that it's very, very flexible and adaptable to different genres.
Yeah.
Even just by tweaking, attribute names, skill names, whatever. We've used it for comedy in both Santa Soldiers and Red Dwarf.
Yeah.
We've used it for high fantasy in Aeroflight. We've used it for modern, because for a long time we had the Mean Streets film noir RPG. We've done, and Airship Daedalus is very much a mix of kind of modern plus fantasy, but you've got magic, you've got psionics, you've got horror,
retro super science.
Exactly.
And then you've got RADS, which is the post-apocalyptic setting as well. It is interesting to me that the system works so well in all of those genres. That it really is just thinking about, well, what works in this world? How does this world work? And then we tweak. But that basic stat with a skill on top of it, that's system, and that you just have to figure out what stats and skills you want for this particular world setting, and you're off and running.
Exactly.
It is pretty nice. And for me, the way I evangelize your product is I always talk about character creation. I just think the character creation is just so fun. It's freaking teeth pulling because you have to make choices. It's not just rolling randomly to determine various attributes. You're allotted a certain set of points in which to place in your stats, and then again in your skills, and you've got to make hard choices because I want this and I want this and I want this, and wait a minute, all my points are gone, and what happened? So it's that moment of back and forth, and what choices do you make and what trade-offs do you make? And that's another element actually to say is that I brought in from other systems is the point build concept. I really have always preferred point build as character creation as opposed to random character creation. There's a for both. It's a design choice, and as a player, I tend to like knowing that everybody around the table started with an equivalent number of assets, an equivalent number of points to build their character, and we're all doing something different with it.
that's really cool to me.
Yeah. Having been a part of and run several Aeroflight and Airship Daedalus games now at this point, it's fascinating. Permutations that keep coming up. When putting together this game we're going to be streaming, and people are coming up, well, what if I did this? I'm like, oh my god, I never thought of that. That's really cool. So I do love that. Everybody's got their own way
Infinite variation.
Yeah, get in on it. Well, let's focus in on Airship Daedalus a little bit. As you say, it's a mixture of a whole deco punk, that retro sci-fi from the golden age of comics in the 20s and 30s. It's a whole bunch of stuff. So what was the genesis behind Airship Daedalus? What did you, how do you get your ideas? What really sparked this one for you?
It actually started. It started from some short fiction I was writing in college in the late '80s, and I just kept tinkering with it. There were always, other settings and other projects to put on the front burner, and so Airship Daedalus just kind of languished and just kind of followed me from, through the '90s and through the development of the XPG system. Until we launched Deep 7 Press in 1999 with the 1PG line, which is kind of a stripped down D6 version of XPG.
And these 1PG
much simplified.
Yeah, these 1PG games, which is they're designed to be done all in a night, right?
Disposable.
Yeah, disposable.
Yeah.
Character creation
Yeah.
and gameplay. It's sit down and have a beer and some pretzels and put a quick game together.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's the rules are they all fit on one page on the character sheet, hence PG, and they also our logo kind of mimics the MPAA movie ratings, and it was meant to kind of mimic movie and television genres. So when we launched, we started with Shriek, which was the game of teen horror, which, again, you're meant to play a disposable character. We've even had what we call, snuff games, where players would come in with a bunch of pre-generated characters and just see how many you could run through the grinder, how many you could kill at the end of the game. So, I mean, each session is meant to be about 2 to 3 hours, but basically not much longer than a feature film. They're all very inexpensive. They're all, PDF, and you can print them out, and
right.
Very, very easy to run, easy to learn, easy to play.
And that was the first things that Deep 7 Press published.
Exactly. When we launched completely electronic. We wanted to be kind of at the forefront, which we were at the time, of getting basically paperless product to players who were at the time increasingly using laptops and PDAs at the time and things like that. And then we moved toward more of a balance of electronic and print. That started with Aeroflight with our premium products. Actually, before Aeroflight, we did publish the first edition of Santa Soldiers by Bill Katzepi. So he brought us the concept. We loved it. We did a licensing deal with him, and we've had that property ever since. And it's now in its third edition with a beautiful color hardcover.
Yeah.
Book. It's so fun. It is so fun.
Yeah.
Again, that uses XPG.
Yeah.
You can do it with comedy.
Yeah. For those who are wondering, it's paramilitary Christmas elves running missions.
Saving Christmas by any means necessary.
Exactly. So you've got Deep 7 Press going. You've got these various games, and you've had this story idea kicking around for a while.
Right. Exactly. And then in about 2010, a buddy of mine who's a comic book artist, Brian Beardsley, and I were sitting at Emerald City Comic Con together, and because I used to share table space with him. He would sell his comics, I would sell my games. Um, and we were talking, and I just kind of floated the idea: what if we put together kind of a vintage style comic, like landscape format, vintage color palette, um, that kind of thing that really looks like something out of the newspapers of the 1930s. Because we were both big fans of Flash Gordon, the Alex Raymond Flash Gordon.
Yeah.
And, so he just was totally buzzed about that, and we put together, built a website, and he started doing the finished inks. I did the colors and the lettering, and wrote all the comics, and we did that for about 2 years. Just putting up twice a week, and then we put a compendium of those comics together in print. And meanwhile, I had written radio adaptations, like an old, radio drama, and got you and your lovely wife and several of other local actors.
Lots of people more talented than me.
No.
Yes.
We did a couple of 2 volumes, actually, with four episodes.
Yeah.
Of the comics, basically, dramatizing the comics with full sound effects and a vintage style crackle and that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I did a few more after that to call Aegis Tales, which was more of an anthology style, just kind of expanding the Airship Daedalus universe a little bit. And then about in 2016, I finally said, okay, we've got kind of an established property going. It's time to build it and expand it out, and decided it was time to launch the RPG line.
Okay.
So it's currently got the core book. It's got the field manual, the Aegis field manual. It's got the
Vigilantes
space.
manual.
Yep, the Vigilantes manual, Valley of the Mist, which is kind of a module, and and then the Interplanetary Guide.
Yeah, which is almost, it's not a second edition, but it's such an expansive expansion.
Yeah, it's huge. It's for people who really like to go the rockets and ray guns route, and do a lot of Barsoom.
Yeah.
Mars.
Hollow moon.
Yep.
Shoot giant bullets into the hollow moon.
Yep.
What do you have? So you had this story idea long. You try it out in various formats, and then you put it into the role-playing game format. What do you think translated really well? What do you really like about the game in terms of telling the story? What worked for that for you?
Well, again, it makes for a really good sandbox when you create a world where magic works and psychic powers work, and dimensional demons, interdimensional demons are a real threat. Where evil occult megalomaniacs are trying to punch holes into the fabric of space-time and pull demonic entities through to try and serve them, and then you've got everybody else who's kind of we like our world in order and not chaos and bloodshed and murder and mayhem. Truth, justice, and the American way kind of stuff. It makes for a really nice open-ended. Okay, so I want to make a really cool character that at some point gets to punch Nazis.
Or proto-Nazi zombies wearing rocket packs.
Exactly.
Yeah. What do you hope people get from the game?
Who could possibly have a problem with that?
Well, I don't know. And I mean, rocket packs, it just adds a...
Is that virtue signaling, Dan?
Well, pro-Nazis, I don't know.
Yes.
What do you hope people take away from playing the game when you think about people are sitting down?
I hope that they, yeah, well, I hope that they like the kind of the premise enough to seek out, the other parts of the, the idea that it involved. We've had so many fans come to this setting through the tabletop RPG and then go, oh, I didn't know that you had radio shows, and we've got a dozen radio shows.
Uh-huh.
I didn't know that you had novels. Well, yeah, we've got 4 novels and an anthology, which you wrote a really great story for.
Thank you.
And Trish wrote too.
Yeah.
So, I just hope that they enjoy it. I hope that they like it enough to maybe seek out some of the other media and be entertained by it.
Yeah. I think you and I have talked about, as we've talked about putting this game together, and as we've talked about trying to do other things with the Daedalus idea, how much we just want something fun. Let's sit down and just have fun. Even if the stakes are dire and the evil is vile and awful, and it's just we're not getting lost in a grim dark. We're not going too far off on a comedy. We're trying just to have a great adventure and just go for a ride for a while.
And that is the rule of pulp. It is the evil is evil. The good is good, and the good will always win. It eventually.
Yeah.
But after it's been put through the ringer.
Right. And who knows how the dice roll?
That's the whole idea. Is that, yeah, action, adventure, and fun.
Yeah.
At a cost.
Right. Right.
Just to make it interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Got to have the conflict. And I hope that's what we're going to give these people when we get this Airship Daedalus game up and streaming in the near future here.
I'm sure we will, because you got a great cast to work with.
We do have a great cast to work with.
Experienced and inexperienced, so people are going to get a wide range of novice players and experienced players, and they're all great characters, by the way. Yeah.
They're great characters, and the people, I mean, we've got actors, we've got writers, we've got artists. So it's a nice mix of creative personalities coming into it. I'm super excited to play with each and every one of them, and we're going to have episode zeros here for each player and their character, how they came up with the character, and we're going to dive into their backstory. I know a lot of the role-playing games we tease out backstory across the whole thing, but really to get a sense of the flavor of the world and all of that, we're gonna pop a lot of that right up for the audience, so they know they'll be seeing some of the tension that the player is feeling. They'll be understanding the tension when, oh wait, this relates to their thing, they're driven to do, and all of that. So hopefully we'll have a lot of fun with that. We talked real quick about the rules. Let's get just a little bit crunchy on those. So you're talking about a stacking system. So we have stats. And stats represent a character's innate abilities, correct? Kind of the stuff you were
raw talent.
Raw talent, that's right. So we have things like strength and dexterity and agility and willpower. And in Airship Daedalus, magic or psychic powers or divine powers are using a stat called essence. They're all coming from that pool. And on top of that, you then have the skills you learn in life. Correct?
Right.
So that's our skill set. So under agility, we would have our fighting skills, our hand-to-hand fighting, our melee weapon fighting, dodging and being stealthy and things of that nature.
Yes, anything that needs like gross motor function, that would be your agility. How to ride a horse, how to
Drive a car.
Sail a boat, drive a car,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Fine motor coordination is your dexterity. That's
Sure.
your firearms, your crafting skills, your
Thieving skills.
technical. Yeah.
Yeah. So a player gets 30 points to place in their stats, and then they have an additional 30 points to place in their skills. Well, actually, let me back up a second there. So let's talk like agility. Let's say you've got an agility of 5, and you have
that's nice and high.
Nice and high, very high.
Yeah.
You've got a stealth skill of 2. So if you're trying to sneak into the warehouse to spy on the goons, I'm going to ask you to make a stealth check. So we're going to take your agility of 5 and your stealth of 2, add them to get 7, and you're going to have to roll
your target number?
Target number. And you're going to roll a d12, and in order to succeed, you need a 7 or below.
Right. You need to hit that target number or less.
Or less. Which, since the huge role-playing game that almost everybody's familiar with, D&D, 1s are terrible and 20s are awesome. We're flipping that here. A 1 in our system is a critical success. And a 12 is a botch, no matter what.
Yes.
So when we're cheering for 1s, you'll understand that. But now
again, that's a holdover from the whole percentile thing,
right?
Because you want to roll low in a percentile,
right? Yeah, no, I was watching a Cthulhu game the other day, and they were rolling percentile dice, and it's like, oh, right, percentiles, yeah, of course. I haven't played Cthulhu since the '80s, so it's been
a while. Man,
yeah. Now, one of the things I like about the XPG system is how well it works against unopposed checks. So if I, as the game master, have a guard outside trying to prevent anybody from sneaking in to spy on the goons, I'm going to have that guard make an awareness check. So that's a different skill. That's a perception skill and an awareness, perception stat and awareness skill. Now let's say the total of those two are 6. That doesn't mean that your 7 automatically beats the guard's 6. That means you make a roll and I make a roll, and we're going to see who's got the greater margin of success. And that's going to determine who's actually stealthy or who's actually aware.
Right. Exactly.
And that is one of the reasons I like that, is because lower skilled individuals still have a chance to succeed against higher.
They still have a chance. And in fact, I would even go further than that. If you don't have any rating in a skill, you can still default to the raw talent attribute that it falls under. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you can still roll against that attribute, even, it's not as good of a chance as having an actual, skill rating in something, but there's still a chance.
There's still a chance, yeah. And when you're super desperate, you just might have to take that chance. So that's really the system in a nutshell, that you're rolling, you've got your stat, and your skill stacks on top of that, giving you a target number. You're rolling your D12 underneath that, and your margin of success will play into the outcome, whether that's...
Exactly.
And you're in combat, then the margin of success helps determine your damage. Or if you're an opposed check against somebody trying to do the exact opposite of what you're doing. And then we can add difficulty or add bonuses. We can say, you know what, it's a really foggy night, so you get a +2 on your stealth check, or you get a +1 and he gets a -1 on his awareness. And real easy to raise or lower the target number based on the level of difficulty you're attempting. So lots of flexibility with that, which as a game master I appreciate quite a bit. Actually, as a player, I like it quite a bit because we don't get too caught up in the difficulty might be this or that, and roll. It's pretty easy. It's let's raise it or lower it 1, 2, or 3 and move on.
Right. Well, and certain weapons will you might have a blade that is very well balanced and would give you a bonus to hit. Yeah. That kind of thing, or extra damage, or or whatnot.
Yeah. Let's talk real quick damage, because it is different for people who are used to a hit point system where it's simply,
Sure.
you know, hey, I took 10 damage and I had 50, so now I'm down to 40. And
Right.
that you work with, everybody's got the same number of wound levels.
Basically.
Yeah, so talk through that real quick.
So everybody's got a basic human range. If we're talking humans, human characters, everybody's got the same basic human range, just as a basis of wound levels, potential damage that can be taken. However, where they differ is you will have a shrug value that's based on your strength and your willpower.
Yes.
I believe it's strength and will, and
Yes.
that the average of the two. So the sum of the two is your save target.
Save is used for when you need to check if you're going to stay conscious after taking a severe hit,
Exactly.
or if you're going to bleed out and die. Save
Exactly.
is important. But
Yes.
the shrug is this idea that I can.
You have an inherent toughness.
Right. Well, I don't, but the character does.
Exactly.
And it's literally shrugging off a few points of damage, or shrugging off a certain amount of the damage.
And some games call that concept soak, or something like that. It's not an unusual concept. It's a way for us, if you have this human range of damage that you can take. You need something to differentiate between characters, and some characters might have better physical training and be more just inherently tough. Some characters might have a magical, some kind of magical spell or something, a special tattoo that gives them, an additional, bonus to their shrug.
Right.
That kind of thing. You can also buy assets in the character creation with your character points, which give you bonuses to shrug and save and things like that.
Right. But then, I mean, shrug isn't just a one-off in the damage system. It factors into actually how much damage you take. So it's not just I can absorb this amount of damage and then go on. You use a multiple of that to determine the rest. So if I'm doing 20 damage and you can shrug off 5, that 15 that's left over is still getting through to you.
Right.
And then we use it as a multiple of shrug. So 15 is 3 times 5. You actually take 3 wound levels. And you only have 7 before you're dead. So that's a big hit.
Yeah. Yes.
And the other thing I like about your damage system is when you start staging down, when you start taking that many wound levels, you aren't hitting as well. You start having penalties to your throws. Whatever you're trying to do, run away, fight, whatever, you're now going to be at a penalty because you're losing blood. Your kneecap got kicked and it's bruised and you can't put weight on it, or whatever else.
Now, I am aware of the criticism of that. That's called the death spiral. Okay. And a lot of people, have been critical of games that have those mechanics that you end up in a death spiral. I find it incredibly realistic. Because if you were, wounded and bleeding and that kind of thing, you're not going to be at the top of your game.
Right.
I think that's incredibly, it's cinematic. It's as well as being realistic. I think it's very dramatic.
Yeah.
So, again, it's a design choice. If you can obviously fudge the game any way you want to, because once you buy it, it's yours. So, so if you don't want to play with the modifiers, the wound modifiers, then throw them out. But as written, it's a conscious choice to include the death spiral because we found it to play very well with the rest of the mechanics, and it's a very realistic kind of phenomenon.
Yeah,
so.
We need a little realism in our fantasy.
Yeah.
Actually, I think it's the cinematic is what sells it for me. And especially in a pulp
Yeah.
adventure, you get, you know, I mean, Indiana Jones, he's banged and he's bustled and
Oh
he's
yeah.
not running quite as fast, and everything's you know, everything's a little bit harder, and
Mm-hmm.
it takes that extra effort to try and finish the job.
Yep. And he pops a luck point, and boom.
Yeah. We'll get into luck points later.
Yeah.
It does lend for more character depth than the more than the
It is.
non-death Spyro games. We do see more
Combat
characters
is
going
lethal.
down. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've seen that especially with Aeroflight, which was very much intended to be kind of the anti, one hit point, kill the dragon anyway kind of game.
Right.
You know, we wanted it to be, hey, if you get shot in the neck with an arrow, you're dead.
Yeah. Yeah. And in the personal game we run, the Aeroflight game, you damn near died from a manicore in your
Yes, I did.
chest. If one of the party hadn't had a healing right there and ready, you would have been goner. So,
They were popping heals on me for like I think three
3
turns
rounds
in a row.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, if the game master hadn't forgotten the poison damage, then it wouldn't have mattered. Game masters don't make mistakes.
No.
All right, Mr. Downing, thank you for the time. Anything else
You're
you want to
most
say
welcome.
about the upcoming game that we're putting together here?
I'm excited to watch it happen. I know I've been kind of privy to the background here and helping you put some things together for the adventure, and I'm very excited to watch these people get together and take on their characters and watch these characters shine.
Yeah.
These are amazing characters and some great players, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
I think so too. All right, my friend. Thank you for the time. Always good to talk to you. And
You too, sir.
And if I can control my computer, we're going to be signing off. Please be sure to check out the channel. We will be adding more content. We'll get the episode zeros from all the characters before we start our first actual play for Airship Daedalus. Thank you. Have a great night.